Hello, everyone. We are now actually on Zoom recording this for you because we experienced some technical hiccups in our live event. We wanted to stream everything live, but it didn't work out quite as well as we hoped. So now we're providing you with a recorded Zoom session so we can still answer your questions and talk about the cultural and personal dynamics of expat life. So welcome, everyone. And hi, Coco.
Good morning. It's early bird morning for me today, and welcome from wherever or whenever you're looking at this. Very cool to have you.
And where are you calling in from, Coco?
I'm from Lima. I'm currently based in Lima in Peru, the capital of Peru, and so it's as we speak 7:15. So it has been an early start for me, but I'm used to it.
I'm glad to have you here and that we're doing this sort of live together. I'm calling in from The Hague in the Netherlands, where I live. This is not the capital, but it's the political capital of the Netherlands. And you and I are both Dutch. For the people that are watching to this session, I think it's good to know. We are both Dutch, but Coco is currently living abroad and I have lived abroad for over 7 years. So we're both very familiar with the challenges of being an expat.
Absolutely. And I think as much, of course, that we didn't want this delay or these technical issues to happen, for me, it's, I'm quite used to living in Latin America. I'm quite used to the flexible mindset, because things tend never to work out as you expect them to, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean. So maybe I think most of the people who will watch this session already know us somewhat, but I thought maybe it's good to introduce ourselves a little bit more. So do you want to start, Coco?
Yeah, I love it. So my name is Coco. One of the most frequently asked questions in my life, is that your real name? Yes, it is written in my passport. Dutch from origin, as you said, and I have been living outside of the Netherlands with some small breaks here and there for now almost 7 years, I would say. I've been an expat in Singapore, in Japan, and from Japan I moved to Chile, Latin America, worked for Chile, Peru, Uruguay, and currently living in Peru. Massive corporate background. Always worked as a security manager for the H&M group. And since the end of 2021, I support organizations to overcome cultural differences in the international workplace. Hence the fact that you and I very often work together.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm super excited to be talking to you about that today. We spoke about this topic many times professionally, but also personally. And I think there's so much to explore when it comes to cultural differences and cultural perceptions. So I'm really curious for today. Maybe a little bit more about me. My name is Amanda Molenaar. As I said, I'm Dutch and currently back in The Hague. I worked as a diplomat for the Dutch government for nearly 7 years. And for that, I also lived in Brazil for 3 years, working at the embassy in Brasilia. I don't have a massive corporate background. It's mostly government, but I also worked in London before in several companies. And now I work as a life coach for expats, and I help them to feel as steady in their personal life as they feel in their career. So I help high achieving expats who've got their career in order, but their personal life just feels a little bit wobbly. So that's where I come in.
Yeah, cool. And would you like to share a bit more of why you and I work together and how you see that our services and our businesses are very complementary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we started working together because I was launching my first online course, Expat Life School, and I wanted to offer my participants a little bit something beyond the personal stuff that I was talking about. Because as much as I sometimes want to think like cultural differences don't really matter, they actually do. And this is when I asked you to host a masterclass for the Expat Life School students. And when I listened to your masterclass, I was like, oh my God, finally things started to make sense for me also personally, because I remember you pulled up a map or a graphic with the culture maps of Brazil and the Netherlands. And so there were like 8 different, I think there were 8 different criteria for each of those countries, and Brazil and the Netherlands couldn't be further away on those lines. And all of a sudden, it just made sense, you know, like, oh, this is why I saw so much conflict going on between the Dutch and the Brazilians on the work floor. So this was also personally already like a good realization for me. But that's when I also realized, you know, the cultural differences do matter. And sometimes as an expat, it's very difficult to see what is cultural and what is personal. So I remember I was being triggered in Brazil by a few things that were essentially cultural differences, but they triggered emotions within me. And that's the personal part. Because what triggers you is something else. You know, it wouldn't maybe trigger me, for example, and it also triggers different emotions. So as an expat, like, we can talk about the cultural differences and the personal stuff, but as an expat, it's sometimes difficult to dissect the two. They can come as one big blur in front of you. And this is when I realized we need to work together, because I think when we combine our expertise, we can really offer a golden solution to the expats that are somewhat struggling in their host country.
Thanks for this fabulous summary and fabulous introduction. And obviously, I couldn't agree more. And I relate to basically what you're saying, your time in Brazil, but so as an expat living in, you know, Latin America, but also in Japan or in Singapore before, you know, I didn't have the knowledge that I have today, right? So I have these two perspectives of how cultural differences do influence, for example, your effectiveness as work, but also how, you know, they trigger your individual and personal well-being, I would say. And I'm super happy to collaborate with you on, you know, helping these high-achieving expats, especially in the Netherlands, because this is the focus, of course, for today as well.
Yes.
You know, to help them decode and dissect what is cultural, what is personal, but we will dive into that.
Yeah. Actually, why don't we dive into it straight away?
Vamos.
About the Dutch, because we actually received a few questions about in advance of the live from people on LinkedIn, and one of them was about the Dutch directness. And I had to laugh a little bit, because even though I am Dutch and you're Dutch, I think you recognize what I'm going to say. I also sometimes struggle with the Dutch directness. So I definitely have it myself. But it was much more present within me before I started living abroad. And being in London and Latin America has really more softened me around the edges. So I'm not so direct anymore as I would used to be. And now speaking to Dutch people, sometimes I am also taken aback by what they're saying. Like, it's just too direct for me, or too, like, it's none of your business. Why are you telling me all these things? So I can only empathize with the foreigners who come from a culture where there isn't this directness, and that they have to deal with the Dutch either as their colleagues or as their friends. And so I was wondering if you can maybe say something about the Dutch directness with your expertise. How do you look at it?
Oh, I have a lot to say about the Dutch directness, but let me start by saying that when we look at communication in general, from my expertise, there's a difference between general communication. For example, you're hosting a presentation for a board meeting, as an example, or providing feedback. And why do we separate these two elements? Because they really make a difference in how direct someone is perceived. Both the Dutch are both in general communication very explicit. So most likely a Dutch person will tell you what he or she is going to tell you. Then he will tell you. Then he will recap what just told. And then there's space for questions. So explicit communication is very key to success in the eyes and the perception of a Dutch. Mm-hmm. Deeply rooted in the culture. It's how kids learn at school, how you learn to communicate with your parents. So very deeply rooted. Parallel to that, they're very comfortable with direct negative feedback. And the contrary of that is that when the feedback is not given direct to a Dutch, it's perceived as very confusing. And I have a very personal example of that, because many people will say, you know, Americans are very direct. They're very direct in their communication. You know, they're a bit overwhelming for many as well. The truth is that Americans are very explicit in their communication, but they're relatively indirect or relatively uncomfortable with direct negative feedback. So I reported to an American boss when I was working in Japan. And as much as also I had a very comfortable communication style with her, because we were both used to being very explicit in our communication. But when she needed to give me feedback, I was lost 10 out of 10 times, basically. And why is that example important? Because, you know, what we think is constructive feedback across the globe really differs. And Dutch people, Dutch culture as a nation believes that negative feedback should stand on its own, should not be, you know, wrapped in compliments, should not be confusing or whatsoever. And if you then come from a cultural background, or your country of origin is, let's say, the US or Asian countries or Latin American countries, where that level of comfort is much lower, you have a belief that constructive feedback should be a bit more nuanced. And then when the Dutch directness comes into place, you know, it might trigger your own cultural perception, and it might feel very invasive or very, well, I think there was someone even that says, you know, I really feel offended once in a while.
Yeah,
Or,
I
you
was
know,
just
they
going to say,
yeah,
you can take it personal, you know, when you are used to this more soft approach, and then all of a sudden the Dutch directness comes in. You can take it almost as like a personal attack, perhaps.
absolutely. And I think, you know, if you're a Dutch leading a team of expats, this is really something to take, you know, to take into consideration, because feedback should be a tool for someone to develop. And once that is received or perceived as super personal and super, let's say, ineffective, then of course, you know, it will not meet the goals. On the other hand, as an expat living in the Netherlands, I think it's really good to keep in mind that for a Dutch, this is not personal. Feedback is usually about your performance at work, is meant for you to develop and to prevent certain things from happening in the future. But I think it's also really important to keep in mind, you know, that there's a difference between general communication, for example, that PowerPoint presentation, and giving feedback. You know, there's a distinction between those two, let's say, behaviors. And the Dutch are very consistent, so both explicit and direct with feedback, but that is not the same in every country in the world, basically.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting. I like this. There's so much to be said, I think, about the Dutch directness, but knowing this, you know, like that it's also your own perception, and that there's no bad intention behind it. It's really meant as constructive feedback, I think is really useful for expats.
Yeah, and I think going back to the example that you gave earlier, Amanda, you know, I showed you, or in the Expat Life School masterclass, we looked at the country mapping as a tool that I'm often using. And, you know, there we map out where countries fall on 8 different type of behavioral skills. And, you know, Brazil and the Netherlands couldn't be further apart, but it's good to remind ourselves on a daily basis that there's no wrong or right. What matters is the distance between those, and how small. The smaller the distance is, the less you will feel affected by the Dutch directness. As an example, Israelis are very comfortable with direct negative feedback as well. So they might feel, so if you're living in the Netherlands as an expat and you come from Belgium, you will perceive the Dutch much more direct than the Israelis will. And that is really important to keep into consideration, because you can learn as much as you want about one specific culture, but you will have your own perception and your own triggers. But this we will obviously dive into in Success Beyond Borders as well, right? So
yes, absolutely.
Super excited to help everyone.
Yes.
I apologize for the alarm on the background. Sorry about that.
You can only hear the tiny bit, so no worries. Yeah, about our events, like we're gonna train 30 expats in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, on cultural differences and perception. That's one part. So I'm really curious also to hear how they are dealing with the Dutch directness, like how many of them are really affected by it, and maybe for some it's just like a small thing, and it's, you know, if they're Israeli, for example, maybe they aren't so affected by it. So I'm really curious to see in our group who's having a hard time with it.
Yeah, and you know, what we will do is we will look at everyone's cultural background, so their country of origin, of where they grew up, and how that impacts your effectiveness at work, working as an expat in the Netherlands, but also what personal triggers you might experience, you know. I mean, some of the questions sent in were also about, you know, that it's hard to find local connections, that it's hard to, you know, find some sort of, yeah, to find your
Yeah.
social circles, I think.
Oh,
Do
definitely.
I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I
And
may add something, or do you want to say something
no,
about that?
please go ahead.
Yeah, because this is a topic that I've spoken to with many of my foreign friends here in The Hague and in Amsterdam, and they are always so surprised when I tell them that I also struggled with the Dutch and their, you know, closed social approach. Because what the Dutch have, I think, is that they make friends for life at high school, university, perhaps their first job, but then they kind of close themselves off for other new friends. I mean, generally speaking, there are exceptions, obviously. But when I came back as a repat, or in between all my trips abroad, I had my very good friends here from university and high school, and yeah, mostly that. But I really struggled to meet new people, like-minded people, and to really make them my friends, because it doesn't really matter, I think, if you're an expat, if you're foreign, or if you're local. It's hard for anyone to make new friends after, let's say, 30 with the Dutch. And my friends were always really surprised in hearing that. And it really also provided them with some relief, like, okay, it's not me. Even Amanda, who's Dutch, experienced the same thing. So is there something from your background also about this approach from the Dutch? I mean, it's not intentional, but they're known for not being so open.
Well, I think if we look at, so going back to the culture map, and most probably many people watching this will be, let's say, know the book, but if we look at how trust is built, something that, of course, in the workplace is extremely crucial, because I think we all agree, regardless of cultural background, that, you know, in order to do business with each other, or especially with a stranger, you need to trust each other. Well, fast forward, there's two ways to look at trust. Even though it will feel the same for me, it will feel the same for you, Amanda, and it will feel the same for the people watching this, but how it's built is different. And when we look at trust, we look at emotional trust from the heart. You're my best friend, I trust you, you know, we grew up together, I really trust you. Or from the brain, cognitive trust. And there's a lot to say about this, but for you know, the lack of more time, I will keep it super short. Dutch people have a tendency to, especially in the workplace, to only use their cognitive trust. So cognitive trust is used at work, where emotional trust is used at home, with friends, with family, and so on. So, for example, me as a Dutch expat moving to Latin America, when I was invited for the 50th birthday of the general manager of the company, and she invited the entire company, I thought, no, but I'm not going, because this is the weirdest thing ever. You're not inviting your colleagues for your birthday, right? It's a super clear example that emotional trust, because your birthday is your personal space, it comes from the heart, is not used in the workplace. And this differs a lot across the globe, where we see in countries, for example, more Mediterranean countries, but also Belgium, Italy, Spain, a bit closer to the Netherlands, Latin America, you see that, you know, cognitive trust and emotional trust is more woven into each other. And with all of that being said, was not so short after all, I apologize. But with all of that being said, you might feel as an expat living in the Netherlands, they don't let me in. They're not making an effort to get to know me. It doesn't really matter who I am. It only matters, what I bring to the table. It only matters basically, the results and the outcome of our conversation or our discussion. To you, I want to say, if that's how you feel, that's not how it is. Every human being, regardless of cultural background, is interested in the human relationship. The only explicit difference or the important difference is that a Dutch person doesn't need to build that relationship in order to trust you at work. But they will appreciate to get to know you outside of work. So if you're trying to make an effort in the workplace to find connections with your colleagues, for them it's a bit like, no, okay, but let's wait until 5 o'clock and, let's grab a beer. So I recommend to keep that, that separation between cognitive and emotional trust separately, and to really, to ride that wave, really.
Yeah, it's a super good advice. So that you don't waste your precious energy, like, why aren't they inviting me to something nice, or why aren't they willing to open up? So now you know why that is so. It doesn't fully explain why the Dutch find it hard to make friends after, their first job, but I guess that's just a given. I also have to say that I actually did find a lot of new friends by looking for them in the areas that I really enjoyed. So I'm an entrepreneur now, and I was looking for like-minded people, and I found that, well, now I have like a big group of friends here in The Hague with fellow entrepreneurs. And my tip also for expats in the Netherlands who are looking to expand their social circle a little bit more with the Dutch is to also really find an activity that you yourself love engaging in, and really be proactive in setting up an activity, a party, a meetup. I mean, there are so many options nowadays, tools that you can use to create something. And I won't guarantee you, but I am sure that Dutch will come your way, because I've also been able to do it. So maybe that's some practical advice also for the ones that are still struggling. Yeah.
And those, I mean, you gave that advice earlier, or you and I talked about this earlier, and I'm following. I recently moved to Peru, and it really helps me. But I do know that I should also take the effort, and it will require more energy on my end, basically.
Yeah.
And yes, if then I reach out to someone and then that person never replies, it's disappointing, but at least I know, that it's not me, it's not them, it's most probably the different approach of, building relationships or making friends. So I think that is also really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think it's really important to have this proactive attitude. Like you said, like, it's up to you to, if you want something, this is really how I look at life. If you want something, it's up to you to go get it. So if you want to have more friends, it sounds a bit annoying maybe, but it's up to you to find them. And you have to make the effort, but really show up as a leader, someone who organizes activities or who brings together like-minded people in a group. And people will come in your orbit. They will come to your activities, and you will eventually create this community. It may take a little bit longer in some countries or some cities, but eventually you'll get there, as long as you're proactive.
I really agree. However, and you said something super valuable at the beginning of this, live, or of this recording, really. So, when all of your, let's say, frustrations, or all of your pains, all of the things that you're, let's say, suffering with are still a blur, and you don't know what is cultural and how to navigate the Dutch and how to be and effective at work and make new friends, and you don't know, what is causing what type of pain or frustration. This is, of course, extremely complicated, right? And it triggers probably a lot on personal level, and I'm looking at you in terms of everything about triggers.
Yes.
Can you just touch a bit on that, because I
Sure,
find it
yeah.
so extremely interesting.
I also have to apologize because I live in front of a school and there were just like a lot of kids screaming and crying. So I just muted myself. So if you hear anything, sorry. But no, like you said, it's, you find yourself in one big blur of cultural differences, personal challenges, and especially if you're a new expat, like everything is new and you have to deal with so much change at once. And you have to build up a whole new life, new social circle, and you have to perform at work, and you have to find your way around and feel at home. And for some people, all that stuff, this overwhelm can really paralyze them. They can just like go inward, isolate themselves a little bit and be like, okay, I'll just deal with one thing at a time or with the minimum that I have to do, which is just my job. But then maybe 6 months later, actually find themselves super lonely because they never invested in their relationship. So I totally understand it. Like it's tough because also this is not for everyone, but I think for the high achieving expats that we're also creating Success Beyond Borders for, they are self-reliant. They are super self-reliant. They don't need anyone holding their hand. They've got their things together, their career in order. They will sort things out. But it also means that everything you do comes down to you. And that can be quite a challenge. Like I said, in this overwhelm, it can paralyze you, but you can also feel very tired, very lonely in this whole process because you always have to rely on yourself. And this is all for the buildup of this whole new life. But what if something else is going on? Maybe a family member gets ill, or you're nearing a burnout, or there's some big personal thing going on in your life. Then that's an extra burden to take on. And this is something that I really see with the expats that I coach. And also I've seen it in my own life. And this is tough. It's, it requires another way of being able to rely more on others, to reach out for help, to also maybe understand your triggers, your patterns, what is going on in your life, to really have, I don't know, more calmness in your life and to feel like, okay, I've totally got this, it may be a challenge, but I will totally figure it out. So this is something that we're also going to be talking about at Success Beyond Borders, this self-reliance and how you can still rely on yourself, but more in a sustainable way.
Yeah, more than talking, I think we're gonna practice, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you can expect a lot of exercises, a lot of
Yes.
practice, getting things done, really, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
extremely.
Maybe that's a nice bridge also to our event and to talk about that for a little bit, because we also got a few questions around it.
Absolutely.
There are
Give
already
it a go.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that we already sold tickets and people are coming and they're excited. And we have this survey that we, ask a few questions to them to really personalize this event to their needs. And I was looking at the answers and I thought, oh, this is so interesting. And there's just so much that I want to share. And I bet it's the same for you, because I think there's so much to share about Dutch culture and cultural perception in general.
No, absolutely, and good that you mentioned the survey that we ask every participant to fill in. And the reason why we do that is for me to really pull out your individual personal perception based on your country of origin. So you will see that everyone within the group will have a different perception. Everyone most probably will perceive the Dutch as direct, because otherwise, everyone will perceive the Dutch as direct. However, how direct or how invasive is really gonna differ depending on your cultural background. So it's gonna be super personal, relevant, valuable, and you can really, at least from my share, but I don't want to sit on your chair, but I know from yours as well. But you can really expect to get what it takes to navigate the Dutch culture, to become more effective at work, but also to navigate through, let's say, the Dutch canals while feeling high on life, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if I remember your masterclass for Expat Life School, like this is also when you looked at cultures from the participants. And I think it was eye-opening for so many of them to see their culture mapped out with the other culture that they're working in or living in. And I think this is going to be so valuable for everyone who's joining Success Beyond Borders, because also in my work, but especially I think also with culture, like often things that are going on, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like you can't really identify or say exactly what it is about. You just know something is frustrating you or it's just not right. And I think with this culture map, you can be like, oh, that's why I experience so much frustration or whatever else in or with this culture. So I think that's super valuable.
Yeah. And then in Success Beyond Borders, then obviously we're also going to focus, okay, now that we have dissect that from certain frustration, now that we have decoded where it comes from, what are then the strategies to deal with them, basically. So it's not only going to be the what, but also the how.
Right.
And you got me thinking while talking that what I see a lot, and I think you can relate, Amanda, is that, a lot of companies, employers are investing quite some, time and energy and training in the adaptation process. So, once an expat is ready to move to the Netherlands, you maybe get cultural training, you maybe get, all the needs to knows of the Netherlands. But, what I see is that, the real work comes after, while you're there, with your feet on the ground, trying to deal with this Dutch working culture. And as much as the quality of life is great and the work-life balance is fantastic, it still looks like a jungle once in a while. Dutch are very uncomfortable with silence. Everyone speaks at the same time. These healthy discussions. There's so much going on. And I don't want to say I think that's where employers drop the ball, because that would not be justifying the effort that they put in. But I think that's where the needs become bigger. And I feel that, I know that that's where Success Beyond Borders is going to make a difference.
Yeah, great. I think so too, I'm sure. And besides,
I'm looking forward.
Yeah, me too. And besides the cultural part, we will also really dive into the more personal things, and I will give you tools and insights to really help you understand yourself and your needs better, so you can really feel that steadiness within as you navigate the Dutch culture. So yeah.
And I can tell you that if I would have known about those exercises and all these tools 7 years ago, I would have been, my life would have probably looked different.
Actually, the same goes for me. Yeah, the same to me, because I only started the coaching journey after I returned home. So also in my case, I was like, oh, I wish I had known all this stuff earlier.
Absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
It's never too late to learn. So yeah, I'm really excited to be sharing those tools and the information that I got, to hear more about your expertise, your practical tips for working with the Dutch and living in the Netherlands. I think even for me, it's going to be interesting. And maybe some practical details around Success Beyond Borders. It's going to take place on the 13th of September in Amsterdam. We have place for 30 expats. And we still have just a few early bird tickets left. And the early bird discount expires anyway this coming Sunday, the 20th of August. Right now, a ticket costs 89 euros, including VAT. And the price will go up to, if I'm not mistaken, 129. I should know this, yeah.
So do I, and I'm silent.
Yeah, so the price will go up this Sunday, after midnight, so you have the whole Sunday to buy your tickets. It's a very easy process. You can just click on the link that we will put in the post around this session, a Zoom session, and it will lead you to the sales page, and you just fill out your details and you will get confirmation with practical details right away. And it's going to be the afternoon of the 13th. So we're going to start at 1:30 and we'll continue until 5. It's a long afternoon, but lots of fun, because we'll do practical things too. And then we'll end the event with networking drinks for an hour. So we're not just going to talk about the Dutch and about your personal challenges and everything that we're going to be sharing with you. You can also put it right away into practice and expand your network with your fellow expats in the Netherlands. So you won't leave empty-handed. You will come back with a lot of insights, practical tools, and also a whole new network of 30 people. So I'm really excited to be hosting this with you, Coco.
Me too. Me too. And I think one thing good to mention, if you're watching this and you're an employer managing expats, or you have expats within your care as an organization, and you would like to give your expats the possibilities to come, then reach out, because then I can see that buying single tickets through the link is maybe not the way to go. Reach out, and then we have a better process for those.
Absolutely.
I
think that's it, right?
It's time to wrap up, right? Because this was very Dutch. We were very explicit. We told everyone what we were going to tell. We shared. We probably have a lot of things missing. We recapped, and there's a summary. Everyone knows where to find the data. So this was a Dutch way of doing it.
Yes. And maybe also, what if people have questions about our work or the event? Coco, how can they reach you?
So obviously you will find all my data through Success Beyond Borders link that you will find together with this post. On LinkedIn under my own name, which is Coco Hofs, and on my website, which is also cocohofs.com. So keeping it simple here, basically.
Yeah, for me, I'm not so simple. So you can find me at LinkedIn on Amanda Molenaar, but I'll just post a link because it's easier. And my website is amandamaximecoaching.com. So if you have any questions, just send us a DM on LinkedIn or send us an email and we'll respond very quickly.
Yeah, also if you're doubting if Success Beyond Borders is for you and you just want to cross-check, because both of us, we don't believe in forcing or pushing things through if we don't believe that it's going to make a difference for you. So if you want to cross-check that, reach out and then we will be happy to help, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay, great. Coco, I will see you soon again. Thank you. And to everyone who's watching, we hope to see you on the 13th of September.
Looking forward.
Bye-bye.